Hi friends, Krista here. Thank you so much for stopping by Books and Jams. Today, I'm a little bit late in coming to you with my mid-month wrap-up for October. So far this month, I have finished 5 books and I'm very close to finishing a 6th. So I'm going to talk about those, and I have 1 DNF as well. So let's just jump right in. At the very beginning of the month, I read The Dreamers by Karen Thompson Walker, and I was a little bit disappointed by this. I'm glad I read it. It is a book about a pandemic. And in this small town in California, it's kind of a college town, a couple college students, it starts with one college girl, falls asleep and cannot be woken up. And then it kind of starts to spread. We follow a couple of different characters around town and their reaction to this pandemic. It had so much potential, and I wanted it to give me more information about this disease, this virus, whatever was going on. At one point it mentions that these dreamers have very high brain activity when they're sleeping, even more than a person who's awake, but it never goes there. It just strictly talks about people's reactions to the pandemic and how it spread and how this town tried to stop its spreading. It is a literary fiction, so there were parts that were, it was super well written. It kept me reading all the way to the end. However, I just ended the book feeling disappointed and wanting more. It's pretty short. Like, why couldn't we have added another 100 pages and really gone into it? But it didn't. And so therefore, I was left disappointed. I think I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I think I did talk about that one quite a bit in a weekend reading vlog as well. So there's that. Another book that I was slightly disappointed by is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. I read The Silent Patient, and I know that Silent Patient has a lot of very drastic opinions about it. I enjoyed it. I don't read a lot of thrillers, so I was very surprised by the twist in The Silent Patient. But I think with this one, maybe I was expecting a little bit more. So this one takes place on a college campus, and Mariana goes to this college campus where these girls are being murdered because her niece Zoe was really good friends with one of them. And she goes as moral support because she's kind of become almost like an adoptive mother for her niece. We kind of know Mariana is grieving the loss of her husband. She's a group therapist. She's having troubles with one of the guys in her therapy group at home, but she kind of leaves all that to go to this college campus to help her niece. While there, she immediately begins to suspect one of the professors who is very well loved on campus. But this professor has this group of young women who are very beautiful and have a lot of potential. And they're called the Maidens. And it's this group of women that starts dying one by one. Mariana is convinced that this professor is the one who is killing them. But then when the reveal happened of what was actually going on, I didn't feel like there had been any clues leading up to that. And so I don't know, I like in a mystery. I'm not very good at guessing what's going on, but I like that I could have guessed if I put the right clues together. And I didn't feel like the right clues were here. I didn't feel like there was any clues leading up to that ending. I also feel like Mariana was not a likable character, and there weren't really any real likable characters in this one. And I think maybe that's the point. I did like the connection with Greek tragedies. However, I'm not as familiar with Greek tragedies, so it didn't really, that whole side of this story didn't really connect with me. There was a lot of just creepy men who were just inappropriate all the time. Yeah, I just don't think that I liked this one really at all. I think when I first finished reading it, I think I did rate it pretty high on Goodreads because it was a very captivating story, and I definitely flew through it and I couldn't put it down. But it didn't sit well with me even at the end, and as I've been able to process it more, yeah, I think I'm going to have to lower my rating on Goodreads. But yeah, this one's not going to stay on my shelves either. Thankfully, then I read 3 books that I absolutely loved. The first is a play called The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. This was delightful. It was so funny. So many comedic moments in here. I've seen the adaptation of it, and I actually watched the adaptation again after having read it. There was a couple changes in the adaptation that I didn't love. I definitely appreciate the play more, which is usually the case, right? The book is usually better than the movie. But in this one, we follow Algernon and his friend Earnest, who is also Jack, and their love interests, who both have this obsession with being married to, or finally falling in love with somebody named Ernest. And so both of these men pretend in different ways that their name is Ernest. It's just very, very funny. I laughed out loud many times in this little itty bitty teeny tiny play. If you have not read this yet and you need a palate cleanser or just something different, or yeah, I don't know, it just was really funny. It just was so funny. So this is my one and only contribution to Victober this year. Then for the Lunar Along, I finished Cress by Marissa Meyer. This is the third book in the series, and it is a Rapunzel retelling. And in this one, we follow a lunar girl named Cress, who has been, at a young age, put up in a satellite so that she can kind of control things and keep an eye on things for the Lunar Queen. And then we also continue to follow the story of Cinder and Scarlet and the gang of characters that we have met in the first two books. Their story and Cress's story collide and carry on from there. So I can't tell you too much about the actual plot line. Just know that I'm still very much enjoying this series reread. I had forgotten how much fun this series is, and I'm still absolutely loving it. As of right now, Cinder and Cress are kind of tied for my favorites. I like Scarlet, but it's a little bit lower than these two. So this is a chunker of a book, and I listened to the audiobook in just a couple of days because I could not stop listening. So much fun. And the last book that I've completed so far this month is Secrets of a Charmed Life by Susan Meissner. I read this as a buddy read with Katie, a subscriber, and Amanda from the Curly Reader, and I loved it so much. I think I ended up giving this one 5 stars. I always have loved Susan Meissner. I think every book of hers that I've read, I've loved. This one did not disappoint. In this one, we start out following a young college journalist who is interviewing an older woman who has lived through World War II and doesn't really talk about what happened to her during that time. But for some reason, she decides she's going to open up to this student journalist and tell her story. So then we get the story of these two sisters living in London just before the Blitz. And it's the time when London children were sent outside of the city to live. The older sister is a budding fashion designer and has all these drawings for wedding dresses and has this dream of one day designing wedding dresses. And just before they leave the city, she gets this opportunity to work with a wedding dress designer and has all of these doors being open to her. And that has not been her life up until this point. And so when they are sent out of the city, she is very frustrated and very determined to get back to London and continue pursuing her dreams without really fully understanding the war and what's going on and how dangerous that could be. And we just follow the story of these two sisters, and at one point they get separated and it's heartbreaking. I definitely had tears welling up in my eyes a couple different times. I loved it so much. I loved the sister relationship. I really could understand, even if I was frustrated with some of the decisions, I could really understand Emmy, the older sister, and the choices that she made. And something else that I loved is that Isabel, the older woman that we meet at the very beginning and a couple times throughout, we know that she's one of these two sisters, and that because right at the beginning, she says, "My name is not Isabel." So we know she's one of these two sisters, but it kind of goes back and forth between which one she really is. In my mind, I was going back and forth trying to guess who she really was. So there was that element of mystery and what happened to these two sisters and the family drama, and set in the backdrop of the London Blitz and the war and a horrible situation. Yeah, it was so well written, so well done. I think I was reading this shortly after reading The Dreamers, and it was, while this one left me so frustrated because there were so many things that didn't get answered, I feel like everything I wanted answered in this one got answered. It didn't tie up in a pretty little bow. There definitely was heartbreak and reality. Like it was not an idealistic ending by any means, but everything that I wanted answers to, I got answers to. So I did appreciate that. And I ended up giving it 5 stars. I love Susan Meissner. Sadly, I did have one DNF that was one of my anticipated reads for the year. And that's That Thing About Bollywood by Supriya Kelkar. At another time, in another format, maybe I could listen to this and it would be better, but I did try to read this and it just wasn't connecting with me, the writing style. This is about a young Indian American girl, and there's so many words that I didn't know the meaning of, and names that were difficult for me to pronounce, and that's fine, but I prefer to do that on audio, so it's super helpful for me. But I also just wasn't really connecting with the writing style at all. I may try this again at some point down the road, but for now, this one is going back to the library and I'm calling it DNF. I only made it about 20 pages in that one, and it just wasn't the right timing for me. Today is the 17th, and I am in the middle of the Sundown Motel, which I don't have in front of me. Well, not in the middle. I've just barely started that. And I'm also really close to the end of 1,000 Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. And this one is so heavy, yet female friendship is at the center of it, but definitely a lot of abuse. And also, I think what I'm really appreciating about it, though, is learning about Afghanistan history, and how different people were in control of the government and how that affected women in particular and the culture. And this all was happening right in my high school, college, early adulthood. And it just is opening my eyes to a country that I had heard about so much in the news over the last 20 years since 9/11, but learning about what was happening in their country even before all of that and what led up to that point to a degree is so interesting. So yes, this is so heavy, very emotional. I have not cried tears, but I've been very heavy-hearted as I read it. But yeah, I'm really, really appreciating that one. So good. It's so good. And then tomorrow I start 2 buddy reads. So it's going to be a great reading month again. But these are the 5 books I've already completed. A little bit of a mixed bag here. I would love to chat with you about these books, about any other books that you've read already this month. How is your reading month going? I feel like I read a little bit of Spooky. I read some Victober. I read buddy reads. I got one of my goals. These 2 were towards some of my goals for the year. I definitely feel very accomplished so far. Even though the number may be smaller than other mid-month wrap-ups, I'm okay with that. But yeah, let's chat down in the comments below. You guys know I love talking with you down there. And I appreciate you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you in another video very soon. Bye.